Welcome to Welfare Clinic. Drugs and knives. Crime, two things, destroys not just the individuals, not just takes lives, but it destroys the communities and families. These are some of the issues we're going to be discussing today with two of my guests. You can watch us live on London Bangla page on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, any comments, please drop them on our comment box and I will ask my two guests to answer them. I'm going to introduce my first guest. Both of them, actually, I should say, is very well known to the community. My first guest is Brother Ashid Ali. He is a principal at London Enterprise Academy. Ashid Bhai, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Oliur bhai, it's a pleasure to join you today at London Bangla.
Thank you so much. And many people knows you, so I hope many people will interact and ask you questions as a head of a school. My next guest is none other than Syeda Choudhury, who is a community activist, TV personality. She's a fashion designer, among many things. Syeda, Babi, I should say, or Afa, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And LB24 is such a good channel, online TV, and I'm so glad to be here in your show and with LB24. And Oli, thank you for inviting me, and nice to see the other guest, Ashid Ali Bhai. He's a famous person. He's always on TV with his head.
No, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to kick off with Ashid Bhai. Ashid Bhai, we can talk in Bengali and English, so many of our parents will be watching in Bangla as well. So আমরা বাংলায় সিলেটি ভাষায় মাধ্যম পারি শুদ্ধ ভাষা যেটা সুবিধা হয় আপনারা লাগে কোনো সমস্যা নাই আপনি তো একজন স্কুলের প্রিন্সিপাল আপনার স্কুলও লোকাল বহুত বাচ্চা ইনফল যায় বা সাবসিকুয়েন্টলি দেখা যায় নট নেসেসারিলি আপনার স্কুলের বাচ্চাই বা অন্য অন্য স্কুলের বাচ্চাই অথবা আমরা কমিউনিটির বাচ্চাই যারা আপনার নাইফ ক্রাইম অথবা ড্রাগ ইনভলভ হয় আমরা জানি যে লকডাউনের আগে many knife crime took places in places like Tower Hamlets. Why do you think that happens, and what is your responsibility?
Okay, first of all, we need to understand that knife crime is a very, very serious crime. Sadly, the trend is that the crime rate has been increasing, and a lot of young people, as well as adults, tragically have lost their lives. A lot of the knife crimes that does take place in and around the country, we only hear usually about the fatal ones. So where there is no fatality, we don't hear much. And unfortunately, over the last few years, we've had nearly 16,000 knife crimes in London, which is way, way too many. And that resulted in about 260 deaths in 2019-20 in the UK, of which 179 of them were in the capital alone. Although these numbers are alarming, if you put it into context, there is 8.5, 9 million people in London. So in that sense, the numbers should not be that alarming. However, in inner city areas, we understand that there is a gang culture. There is a lot of young people who are involved in criminality, who want to belong. And in order to belong, there is initiation of gangs, which requires people to carry weapons and do favors for older gang members. I'd like to urge your viewers that despite us being in a lockdown in tough economic times, we must stay away from crime at all costs. Okay, the people who lose a loved one, they know what they go through. And a lot of the time, sadly, the parents don't know that their children are involved in these things. So it's important that parents are aware and know about the whereabouts of the children during school days, after school hours, teenagers, whether they're going to college or not, what kind of friends they associate with, who they are interacting with online. If they disappear for a period of time, are they involved in county lines? Are they being sent to do favors outside of their areas? So these are crucial. Okay? And we also previously have seen turf wars, postcode wars, where people feel that they have to belong to a group or a gang in order for them to become accepted or valued in society. Um, Also, a lot of the blame responsibility has to be with politicians, because politicians over the years have made cuts in local services, whether it's youth centers or policing. We've seen lots of police stations closed down, and there is a direct correlation between having visual policing and crime. And something else that we need to be aware of is the actual crime and the fear of crime. A lot of people, when they hear about an incident through the news, through the social media, it does get the whole community scared and intimidated. And we need to be prepared to speak to our youngsters to make sure that we conduct our daily life, whether it's going to school and back, college and back, in a safe manner. London and big cities like Birmingham, Manchester, Newcastle, Edinburgh, these cities are well patrolled, not physically by actual police officers, bobbies on the beat, but by CCTV. And I have seen CCTV used by police officers, rather than chasing criminals on foot or using their cars, they track them using the CCTVs that are around in these big cities, and eventually they will catch up with these perpetrators of crimes. But I would not like to see any young people take a risk and become victims or perpetrators of these heinous crimes.
Thank you for that, Ashid Bhai. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to move to Syeda. Syeda, you are a mother. You are a sister. You've been active for many years within the community. And we have too often have seen videos on social media circulating where young people are running around with the baseball bats and all sorts of weapons, and their mothers or fathers around them unable to control. Are we, as a parents, losing control of our children?
As parents, whether we're losing control over our children now or 50 years ago, I think we have seen, if you talk about Bangladeshis, I don't know what you're really aiming at. Are you aiming at one particular group?
Oh, no, so if we take Bangladeshi, for example, given that
Okay.
we all three are from Bangladeshi community,
Okay.
in places like Tower Hamlets, large number of victims, unfortunately, has been from Bangladeshi background, and many lives have been lost.
Lost, absolutely. We've seen lives been, taken in Bow not very long ago, in where I live at the moment, here to like knife crimes. We're talking about parents and parenting and whether we are losing control over them. I think it's not something new that that we're going to we are seeing and we have seen. We have seen different types of parenting throughout 20 years ago and now, and then like next 10 years probably. So I'm talking about, if I talk about back in the 80s, I was a youth worker when I was 16 myself. One of my job was one of my first job was as a youth worker, and that at that time parents, there were less of us. I mean, just to say another thing is I used to work in Bow, Kingsley Hall, and Rahman was my colleague in 1986, I'm talking about. So I started my life as working with youth, as a youth worker, working with youth. And at that point, what we saw, the parents had less interest in the children's regular life, everyday life. And that's because of a lot of things like language barrier, cultural barrier, the newcomer in this country. There's a huge list that why parents, I'm not saying all parents, but when the parents could not take care, we saw bad results. So I'm talking about that particular group. So at that time, there was one type of parenting and they're losing the control because they had not much choice, because they had to earn money and do many other responsibilities that they're here for in this country. But then over the years, what we are seeing is a lot of other elements got attached to why youth are behaving like the way they're behaving like this, and why parents are not taking much care or giving them. See, the time and the responsibility and the phases with the different time, like the responsibility, all the other things like social media, everything came now. It took over, and we see parents are educated and parents are trying to take care of them, but there is a media, there's social media working in there. So we have so many different phases that we've been through, and we still have it now.
But Syeda, you say this, but আমরা জানি যে কিচেন নাইফ নিয়া গড় থেকে কিচেন নাইফ লইয়া গিয়া অ্যাটাক করা হয়। সো আমার ছেলে অথবা আমার মেয়ে যদি আমার কিচেন থেকে নাইফ লইয়া গিয়া অ্যাটাক করা হয়, who is responsible for that?
Well, why would the child pick up the knife in the first place if there wasn't something going outside the house? So there is some sort of urge or some sort of something going on, a peer group pressure. They have godfathers nowadays. They have this leader, like Ashid Bey said, in each borough or each postcode, they have some sort of leader where they are asked to do those things. Parents played a huge role. I'm not saying about. I've got children and they're big now, so they were young at some point, obviously 10 years ago, and I kept eye on them. Obviously, I mean, we are the people who are aware, some of us, and we are trying to make a difference, but not everyone is trying to make a difference in the community. So for us, we shouldn't take it for granted, but we did work for it. But then parents play a role, but I wouldn't say to start with a huge role, to be honest, because we have seen a lot of youth services cut in. Because we are talking about Bangladesh family, we had Blida, we had PIO, we had Nafas, we had many, and I used to work for housing inclusion, social inclusion with housing associations. We used to give a little bit fund, but it's been cut in a big, like the voluntary sectors. All this youth work was run by voluntary sectors, and they've been cut at a big proportion. So we don't have all of the support. Yeah, parents should get more involved. That goes without question. But what's happening? What is the alternative when they're out there? There's so much to say about that. We have seen too many cuts and too many, money being put into something else that is not helping the youth.
Hold on to that thought about the cuts, and I will certainly come on to the cuts and the youth service and voluntary sectors which made significant contribution. Ashid Bhai, you said politicians have failed, and today Boris Johnson have admitted that Britain have failed to stamp out knife crimes 20 years after Damilola Taylor passed away. He was tragically killed, and he would have been 31 years old if he was alive. He would be celebrating his birthday today. So, what else politician can do, or what they're not doing that should be doing?
Okay, so I'm not a politician. I am an academic. I'm an educator, first and foremost. And yes, Damilola Taylor was tragically killed in Peckham. Prior to Damilola Taylor, Stephen Lawrence was murdered by a group of white thugs. I think it was Gary Dobson, David Norris, and his gang, just for being a black boy living in South London. And I was growing up at that time, similar age to Stephen Lawrence. His death did make some huge waves in terms of changing public policy, because the publication of Lord Macpherson's report in 1999 brought in the terminology institutional racism. And what is racism in the police, racism in the workforce, and people were able to use a definition to try and combat racism in their communities and in their workplaces. Again, previously we used to look at the minority communities becoming victims of knife crime. In Tower Hamlets, a classic example was the killing of Altavali in 1978. He was stabbed in the neck by white thugs, racists, the National Front, BNP, what we used to call it at the time. And again, that got the Bangladeshi community mobilized. Now what we are seeing is, about 10 years ago, it was the black on black crime. But I am absolutely saddened to see the rise in Bangladeshi knife crimes or using sharp weapons. It might not be knife, it could be screwdrivers, and it could be other stuff that young people are carrying. And again, we cannot just blame the politician. Politicians have a huge role in terms of their policies, in terms of where there are cuts, where there are services. But strong and stable families is really, really important. The role that community leaders, people who want to become leaders, people who want electoral positions at local levels or even national levels, as well as some of the community leaders who've got membership of various educational trusts, village trusts, you want to name them, they need to play an active role in making sure that our families, parents engage with the young people. Make time for these young people, understand their needs, desires, aspirations, try and understand what the issues they are facing. We saw recently in Poplar where a young boy was called out of his house and then stabbed in front of his mother. There was a death, sadly, last year of another Bangladeshi, I think in Westbury. I think he was about 20 years old, which again, straight after lockdown. And a lot of people are saying one of the best things of lockdown was crime reduced. Yeah, because people were not out, and as soon as lockdown was lifted, people were out and about, and things were happening again. In terms of solution, there is no easy fix. I was a believer in terms of being tough on crime and tougher on the causes of crime. And that's where political influence is really important, giving support to local authorities and police services to become tough. Again, we saw police racism and police brutality. We are looking at a lot of the police brutality that stems from America, Black Lives Matter campaign. We saw a number of young people being killed by police officers in the States, and some of that cascades into the UK. However, at present, police is our best solution. We need to work with them, we need to understand them, we need them to.
But Ashid bhai, we complain when we have too much stop and
Of course.
search by the police. We also complain about that. So the problem is in defense of the police, they have a very tough job to do. If they stop somebody, they get accused of racism and all sorts of stuff. If they don't stop somebody, somebody could tragically lose their life. So how do they go about trying to manage both?
Getting the balance is very, very important. Local intelligence is important. We have to support the police. They don't get them all right. Some of them cases they will get wrong. Yes, we see the statistics. Black and minority young people are significantly likely to be stopped and searched. But if we are looking at inner city London, where we're looking at Tower Hamlets, Newham, Hackney, and areas like that, where a significant amount of the young people on the streets happens to be black and white, so black and Asian. And if crime is high, then sadly, the people who will be stopped and searched will be of that community, right? And what is also important that we need it's tough for families. Families should be able to go forward to the police and say, look, I am really worried about my son or daughter, right? I am really worried about what they might be carrying. They might be up to no good. That's tough because no family wants to criminalize their own children. But that phone call might save their child's life or stop them from being in harm's way. There are research available that knife doesn't protect people. Knife makes people puts them even at a higher risk. Only last year there was a 15-year-old schoolboy from Newham. I'm not gonna name the school, a black boy, and he was engaging on a social media conversation. Again, one of the harms of society for young people is social media. They should be kept away from social media. They should be engaged in having a child, growing up, doing the schoolwork, supporting the family. But that particular boy was engaged in a discussion, and somebody said to him, "Have you ever shanked anybody?" And his response allegedly was, "You will be my first." Right, trying to act tough. And then a few days later, the other boy stabbed him on the bus in Stratford, and he died at the scene. So things like that can be prevented, and parents need to be aware of what their children get up to, who they engage with. Stop and search is not the perfect solution, but until we have a better solution, working with local community, we must support stop and search, and we must support, and again, police need some community awareness training. where they can, work with the community and be seen as supportive rather than working against the. My engagement with the police back in 2001 after the Oldham riots, we had a very um, difficult police chief at the time, who we thought as young people was actually partly responsible for adding fuel to the fire by leaking statistics to the newspapers, was creating scaremongering headlines. When that police chief was replaced by a new police commissioner in Oldham, superintendent, he would contact people like me and say, look, we need your help. We've got these young people who up to no good. Do you know them? What is the background like? What reaction will you get from the community? And not only did crime fall at that time under his leadership, the police worked with the community, and his career, he had a fast track climb into the Greater Manchester Police.
Ashid bhai, thank you for that. I just want to go to Syeda in terms of the leadership that you mentioned. And I agree, there has been significant cuts in youth service, especially in Tar Hamlets and neighboring boroughs. But we still have huge number of leaders, Saida, within the community, whether they are, self-promoted leaders or appointed or selected, whichever way you want to look at it. But do those leaders have some sort of roles towards our next generation of young people that is growing up, or do they not have any sort of? Because I often see there is so many organizations, they might be doing such a good work elsewhere, but they seems to be failing to target the younger generation. And often we see that
Absolutely.
this decision is made on behalf of young people without getting young people involved in any way, form, or shape.
Absolutely. We are the leaders. If you say the leaders, then they should act like leaders. And we don't have many leaders really acting like leaders. We see many clown leaders, and it's in the history of our wonderful Bangladeshi community. I'm sorry to say that, but fame is something drive us to it. The newspaper, to be having a picture on the newspaper, name on the newspaper, and any and now media coverage by TVs, digital, all of that. So you said about should we have a role? No, this is our responsibility. Role should be 100%. It goes without saying that they should have really take that responsibility as leaders. So I think when we have so many organizations and then we don't see many outcome to combat serious issues like knife crime. I mean, we can have an association here, and we are trying to do something in another country, for instance, Bangladesh. But we are not trying to solve the problem that the country we are in. And even my own child is involved in knife crime and some sort of drug issues. See, drug and knife crime goes hand in hand. And we know that how drugs being abused in places like in Tar Hamlets, for instance. I can talk about the place where I've worked and lived all my life and studied. And every election time, when we used to go around buildings, we could smell drug, weed in every single building in Tar Hamlets. I can talk about that because of from my experience. So it always goes in hand, because obviously you are dealing, you are making someone reach out there, so that person is telling you to do this, and then you can't do it because other obstacle comes in. You have to go and knife your opponent, and all of that problem comes in, and it's so much driven by driven by drug, and also driven by what your peer group is doing and what is your but when we come to the leaders, yes, the leaders can do so much. Community groups can do so much. If they could do so much charity work, make buildings in Bangladesh, make like hundreds of mosques in this country. But their priority is who's going to pray in that mosque. They need to understand their priorities. Like, if I make my youth, don't give them enough attention. Who's going to go and pray in that mosque? So what are we really doing? We need to
Do
invest.
you think, do you think, and I want to ask you this question as a mother, is that do you think that often many fathers are too busy becoming chairman and presidents of organization and leaving everything or the ownership to the
Neglected.
mother to manage? Because, technically, the way I see, the father should be the role model of the children. The father should be teaching all of these things. Because take, for example, Ashid Bhai, because I know he's a principal of a secondary school, but I know he works very hard. And over the lockdown, I have seen on his social media how he taught his children and doing classes and education. And the question is, how many fathers during lockdown did that?
Absolutely. We okay. We had some good examples this lockdown. We've seen people doing a lot of like involving young people in the house with gardening, and I've seen Ashid by doing that as well. And my children are too old to me to do anything with them, to be honest. I've done my part back in the days. They're 27 and 22. I'm looking to get him married, my son. So anyway, but he was the head boy of a step degree school when he was studying there, and he used to come and tell me. See, I don't want to use my example because I don't want to show this to my child, and my child became a head boy. I don't like talking about an example. Okay, it could be a role model thing if it comes to this, but I'm saying we've given enough time to our children. I'll say that. Me and my husband, we tried to give them the best we can within our capacity. So to become a head boy, you need some sort of understanding, some sort of articulate, like you should be an articulate person, and name it. He had a lot of qualities, and children come with qualities, and we have to just dig them out, find their potential. And so that's where we fail. So for my children, I can talk about how yes, we talked about other things all the time. How was it class? How did your exam go? How did that? Throughout, it felt like they were next to my skin, my children, and I still feel but my husband, both of us were there. But with the knife crime, I'll come back to that. It's mainly committed by boys. And not we don't see many girls. I don't know. I don't know, the statistics don't specify girls or boys. So yes, you're right. The dad is the ultimate, role model for the sons, So definitely, people are too much getting bogged down with putting their names on the newspaper, becoming a leader, fighting constantly, chairman, leader, or the treasurer, the three big posts. And we have so many. One person belonged to tarar gaur dekhba ekta, tarar town ekta, tarar তোমার পোস্ট অফিস এলাকা জেলার একটা প্রত্যেকটা জায়গার ফাঁসটা করিয়া তোমার থাকে বাংলাদেশ জড়িত। And when you come to this country, এলাকা বেস থাকে এবং লন্ডন বেস থাকে, গ্রেটার এন্ড ইনার থাকে। So inner London, greater London, Newcastle, every single one of them got so many leaders. And then what's happening is we are seeing knife crimes at the same time. আমরা যদি অত বেলা অত অর্গানাইজ করতাম পারি, আমরা গড় অর্গানাইজ করি না কেন? আমরা বাচ্চিন্তরে where can we sort the simple thing না, it's a hard জিনিস, এটা লাগে করতেছে না, but you really have to invest in your children because they're the future of you, and you're the one who's going to get back, stabbed basically by
No,
what's happening.
very, very well said, Saida. I think it's really, really important that parents do invest time in their children. And I think it's, the other thing is that how often do parents sit with their children, have a meal together, or ask question, how was their day, how was their education? Because I know many families, and I'm sure both of you knows many families where the father goes out in the early in the morning. When he comes home, children are sleeping. He's sleeping in the morning. Mother taking the children to schools, and then barely there is any conversation between children and the father, because either father working away or busy with his other stuff going on. So but we have to find, in that busy schedule, we must find the time for the children.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure Ashid Bhai agree to that. Absolutely, we have to. There are. We should prioritize, and the right way as well. There should be the top three things that in your life. First thing are the children. Once you have the children, they're your first priority, and bring them up when they're young. Don't go to them when they're 28 or sorry after 16 because they're like sponge. So sponge, when you dip in the water, it takes up whatever. This is brain. When you are very young, your brain is like a sponge. So don't teach them when they're over 16 or 18. You have to start very at the beginning because people think, oh, bacha 7 বছর বুঝতো না, 8 বছরে বুঝতো না. No, they start learning every single thing that you do, everything you say. They observe, they take it in, and they tell you when they're older. Because now I can see my children tell me what they saw when they were 3 years old, 4 years old. So I'm talking from experience that don't come to them. He's not going to connect to you because you've never been around with for him. So শুরু করতে হইবা very young বয়স আর বাদে যদি দেখাশোনা করো না my son is 27 আমি কি তার এখন জিজ্ঞাইতাম নি তুই কিতা করবে like as in who are your friends or anything like that. You don't need it anymore. You need them when you need this all of that when the child is very young. After that,
Ashid, let me stop you, Ashid Bhai. I want to give you opportunity because you are a father, and I'm sure you know many fathers. What is your opinion on what Syeda is saying?
Right. In terms of getting to know your children, it's really, really important that you develop a very strong, close bond from a young age. Right? Because, like Syeda mentioned, when the children are older, they've already formed their own views on life, their own friendship groups, their own interests and hobbies. And, after the age of 17, 18, when they can drive, have their own cars, they don't need you that much. Yes. Right. Well, however, parenting doesn't end at 16, 17. But parenting continues because we, even in our 40s, we look forward to advice and guidance from our elders. One thing that this lockdown has proven and has shown, but I don't know if we are able to remember back to April, May, it was a delight to see so many families praying Taraweeh together in their homes with their fathers and sons and other family members joining in. I was allowing my two sons to lead the Taraweeh prayers, which was a fantastic experience. That's one of the benefits when the mosque were closed. If they were open, the children will not get the opportunity and you wouldn't get that bond. Right? And again, when you mentioned about showing interest and supporting the children to engage in the school work, college work, university work, it's not just the father. The mother is very important. In fact, Oliur, I'm not going to take all the credit. My wife does a phenomenal amount of work organizing my children to make sure that they have their daily diet of work, in the evenings and the weekends on top of their schoolwork, because we really want to push them, we want to challenge them, we want to give them the broad understanding so that they can diversify at a later age. But the main aim of your topic today is drugs and knife crimes. And I have the benefit of driving up and down the country, because I am from the Greater Manchester, born and brought up in Oldham, and I did lead a youth organization, a very big youth organization at the time. And I see young people. My background was different from theirs. These were young people who were not interested in college and university. Whereas we went through university, we expected to have a formal route in terms of the world of work. A lot of people will feel that there is injustice out there. They will apply for 10, 15 jobs. They can't get interviews. They haven't got qualification. Maybe their surname isn't matching. And as a result, the frustration kicks in. What do I do? Do I go back to the family trade or whether it's restaurants, taxis, and other jobs? Or do I give up and move into something which will give me quick successes, potentially able to make quick money from crime and drugs and so on, but I can't sleep well at night. I can't open the door when someone's knocking. Okay, these are tough choices that people make. I am fearing, as somebody who has a foresight of what could happen, this global pandemic, the national pandemic, the fellow scheme, the lockdown, the impact on the economy will significantly affect Black and minority children, because we are seeing if one job is advertised in a coffee shop, there's hundreds of applicants for that one job, right? So our young people will struggle. As a head teacher and senior leader over the last, 13, 14 years, we were struggling in London to find high quality teachers. Now teachers can't get jobs. For the first time in about 15, 20 years, we've got surplus of people because people cannot leave the country, they cannot go abroad, they can't leave the profession and work in the city. The city is more or less closed. People are working from home. All that has an impact. So, we have to show resolve to these tough times, and families have to show love towards one another and have that bonding to support one another through those tough times. And how do you know in tough times? I was listening to an interview by one of the townless MPs, Rushnaro, yesterday on BBC, and she said 60% of the children in Tower Hamlets are growing up in poverty. There's now 32 food banks. It scared me because 6 years ago, when I was collecting food donations from our school, I think there was only one or two food banks in Tower Hamlets, right? And that shows the extent of poverty. Poverty can then lead young people into despair and desperation. And again, it's our job as adults, as parents, as educators to give hope and belief to our young people and to keep them on the right path. And raising children is not the job of one parent. That's not just, the credit can't just go to the father or the mother. It needs both parents and extended family support to make sure that they develop as young people with strong family connections, strong social and moral values as well.
Absolutely, Ashid Bhai, because I think it is responsibility of the
Both parents.
both parents, because I think we have to know where our children are, because I often used to say to, when back in the days I did the school visits, I used to say to the parents, if your child is out at 10 o'clock at night when they should be home, then you have to ask yourself why your child is out at 10 o'clock at night. It's not responsibility of the politician or the schools. But Ashid Bhai, I want to ask you something else before I go to Syeda. In terms of you mentioned about social media, and we know many young children have mobile phones. And as a head teacher of a school, as a principal of a school, how many parents do you think actually check those mobile phones, what's exactly going on in those mobiles apps? And there's so many different apps nowadays that young people can download, and there is all sorts of communication. For example, we know the WhatsApp. A lot of people will use WhatsApp, but there's an age restriction. If you're under 16, you shouldn't be using a WhatsApp. But we know many young people do use WhatsApp. But do parents actually check what exactly is going on those WhatsApp groups and other social media platforms?
Right. Sadly, we do have a high proportion of young people with mobile phones. I, Me personally, I am absolutely against children having smartphones. My boys are 15 and 16. Right? They don't own a mobile phone. They've got an iPad, they've got laptops, they don't own a mobile phone. Only this summer holidays gone, I bought them a £15 phone from Argos because they were doing a Duke of Edinburgh Silver Award in the middle of a forest in Surrey. And because of lockdown, they allowed us to, keep the children overnight in the hotel. So we had to find where our children were just in case they needed us. Here's a brick phone. The phone is no longer with them. The phone is responsible for a lot of the divisions and difficulties young people face because we don't know what they're doing. We don't know whether they're on Instagram or Snapchat. We don't know who they're taking sides with, who they're commenting against, who they're labeling. Every school that I am aware of, whenever children are involved in what we call cybercrime, crime related or offenses related to things online, messaging online, abusing people online, sending photos online, name calling online, they're all dealt by the police. So my advice to parents watching, whilst the children are young, right, get them to grow up in a responsible fashion that you are in charge of that family. You don't need a phone at the moment. You don't need these gadgets. I put some parental controls on the Wi-Fi. Now the children don't have an income source, so they cannot afford data. No, you are in charge of the house. You pay the bills. If the child doesn't go to bed by 9:30, I switch off the internet. Be in charge. Don't turn around and say, I need to watch my satellite TV. Then if I switch the internet, I lose connection. You need to be brave enough to restore those controls in your house, negotiate with the child, make them understand the lives that they are leading. And again, through those communication and regular input. And Syeda mentioned earlier on, do you sit down with the children to have a conversation? Do you watch what they're doing? Do you take interest in their lives when they're young? Do you celebrate the achievement? One of the assemblies that I do regularly, right? My experience, of us, as a first, second generation Bangladeshi, is our parents, their lifestyle has been earn whatever you can, send somewhere back to your families, build a nice house, right? And they haven't taken huge interest. Unless the child graduates with a good degree, we don't celebrate the small steps. It's important that we celebrate the small steps. It's important that we engage the certificates that they get from schools, the karate club, the medal from the football league that they might play at under 16s, under 14, under 12, and so on, right? And be part of the child's life. Take them to those sporting activities. Take them to those ceremonies. Take them, right? In a safe environment where they can meet their families, sorry, their friendship group and peer groups. And in that way, you'll develop a stronger bond with the child. And at an older age, if they feel that they've got difficulties, they can speak to you. One of the things that we see, and I'm going to stereotype, the communities in Tower Hamlets, because I grew up in Oldham, which is the third largest Bangladeshi community, predominantly from Sylhet. But we not only do not make time for our children, we say to them, go away, go to your mom, go to your dad. I haven't got time for you. I'm too busy for this. We don't show that interest. And then when the child's in trouble, you don't know why they're in trouble. And as a
They
result,
don't tell you.
respect. Yeah.
Because I think ওই জিনিসটা আমি বাংলায় কইব আশিক ভাই, বিকজ আই থিঙ্ক জিনিসটা হইছে যেটা যে সময় আমরা বাচ্চান্তর লগে কানেকশন থাকে না, যেগুলো আমরা কানেকশন লুজ করিলাই আমরা বাচ্চান্তর লগে, এই সময় দেখা যায় যে আমরা বাচ্চান্তে ফেল করডা অথবা ওজনে আপনি কইলা যে কোন সময় কোন বিপদ ফডা অথবা কোন জায়গা যাইরা না যাইরা খার লগে মিশরা, বিকজ আই থিঙ্ক হ্যাভিং গুড ফ্রেন্ডস ইজ রিয়েলি ইম্পর্টেন্ট। যদি আপনার ফ্রেন্ড বালা না থাকুন, এতে দেখা যায় যে আপনার ফ্রেন্ডের কারণে আপনার অনেক জিনিস ঘটে। বিকজ আমি দেখছি, I grew up in Birklane and I saw drugs every day. The Birklane was once upon a time red light district area. We saw, যেগুলো সকালবেলা স্কুলে যাইতাম, we saw needles there, we saw drugs, we saw foil papers, all sorts of stuff we saw. And I remember new roads and places like that. But Syeda, we used to have back in 80s and 90s. There was a BLM. There was a game used to call Birklane Mafia. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
And there was gangs, and there was always drugs. There was no doubt about it, because I used to see in New Road and stuff, empty flats where people will go in and smoke, then come out. Okay, but there was no knives, and this knife trend seems to be seen something more recent. The young people feel they are tough if they have a knife on them. They are like it's a manlyhood kind of thing.
From my experience, when I was 19, a friend of mine, he was 17. I found a knife in his pocket. I took that out and chucked it in the river. And I said, why? First he took it out, and I said, why have you got a knife? He goes, my dad said, this is a protection. And that was when I was 19. That was in 1989, 90. Just giving my age away now. So he had a knife, and there's a random boy that I used to see live run away. So, and it was I think I was so scared to see that knife. And that was in as I said, a long time ago. So we don't know what secretly goes in people's houses. I was always brave. I didn't care if I put my hand in his pocket and find this. I would put my hand in his pocket, and I did kind of that. I did that, took that out, because I could see that he was fiddling with a knife. So I don't know. This is just one case, a random case. And I took it out of his pocket and I chucked it in the river because I was next to a river, Alvdong's area. So whether they used that to kill anybody at that time, that I think that was less of that then. And now is that time was for protection because we had BNP, British National Party. The first Derek Beacon became councillor in Isle of Dogs area, and we still live there, and we still do. My parents are still there. My brother is there. My brother nearly got killed by about 40 men. He got chased by 92 by 40 white men and young boys, older boys, I mean. At that time, he was chased because he was Bengali and he was Asian, and Isle of Dogs, Derek Beacon got elected. We are just the first Bengali in that building. So many other issues. So what I say now, knife has become more easy to get hold of, and people are utilizing it in the wrong way. And I've seen obviously less, but also don't forget, in numbers we are increasing. So as drug was always there, but we saw less of it because it was less of us. More people are densely populated, the area is, we're going to see more of everything. It's the ratio-wise, this is what the case is. Obviously, there's more drug now and more crime and knife crime now, that's for sure. And I totally agree of, like you said about social media, the WhatsApp group. Also for Facebook, you have to be 13 or 14 to have a Facebook account. People open it when they're 8 years old. So there is nobody, because nobody's going to find them. Come and say, look, you have to pay £10,000 fine if I find your child is, have got Facebook when their child is under 13 years old. Through Facebook, through even like a lot of things the parents need to scan, like school has the scanning system of what gets streamed through their internet. So Ashid can say that better. I know because my husband is a teacher and they always keep eye on the children, what they watches and what sort of things get passed on to the media in the school. Whereas parents, I wouldn't say, because when we were growing up, my mom was illiterate with, English. She knew how to read a little bit. She knew English just to get by, but she wasn't educated in this country. We are parents now. I don't think we have an excuse anymore that, I can't, look after. I don't know what goes on in my children's life, because we are aware. We grew up here. We are like fourth generation. Maybe I'm probably third generation, but according to the statistics, we are like the fourth generation, and we cannot use the excuse now saying, we don't know the language, or we don't know what our son gets up to. It's just because we are ignorant. We are not taking much care or giving much time. We are just being selfish, I would say, and just care about what we really want to do to us.
We're getting some comments on our pages, and obviously a sister wrote a very long statement, which is very difficult to read. Actually, so it's a very long thing, but I think in nutshell she's saying the children are very vulnerable. Parents are very busy with their routine day-to-day duties, and at times probably they get attracted to, because of the vulnerability, they get attracted. Now someone else commented in terms of domestic violence and all of those and poverty. I think all of those do play a part. Ashid mentioned earlier about the poverty, and Tower Hamlets is one of the poorest borough in the country, and people are living in extreme overcrowding, housing. There is no space in the house. Young people do go out, and I think when they go out, they do end up mixing with the wrong kind of crowd. Your friend will say, have a little puff of cigarettes, or a spliff or something like that. That's how kind of it starts, because it starts with things like that, and it can deteriorate quite quickly and quite rapidly. And the next minute, their life is in danger, because we know in Tower Hamlets where young child was called out of his house and was stopped on his doorstep.
Yeah.
So, and subsequently we found out that those were friends of his brother. So they went for the brother, but they end up killing the wrong guy. So
wrong person in the wrong, yeah, time.
so so obviously in that regards, someone said Tower Hamlets can't be poor. All the kids drive Ferrari and Lamborghini. So and I think that's another thing, because obviously if your child is buying a car
Yeah,
or iPhone 12 or things like that, which is very expensive, and they're not working, where are they getting the money from? Nobody's asking those questions.
absolutely.
Yeah,
They're not.
so I think it's really really important in that regards. Ashid bhai, we are almost end of our show, and I want to ask you, obviously some of the things that we talked about, these are kind of interconnected when it comes to drugs and knife crimes, because if you neglect your children, if you don't invest enough time, if you don't do all of those kind of stuff, but youth centers played a very vital roles in young people's life, and I've seen it. People had somewhere safe to go in. They had, sports activities. They had mentors, all sorts of stuff there. And since those youth centers have been closed down, not just in Hamlets, but in Newham, in Redbridge, in different localities, do you think that has had a detrimental damage on young people's future?
Okay, thank you. Youth centers are an important part, but they're only a small part because the youth centers engage a small number of people at any one time. And they did provide space for young people in a safe environment. Schools play a big part, the mosques need to play a huge part. It cannot just be about learning the Quran and etiquettes, but also need to educate our young people in terms of growing up in a society like this. I spent a lot of my holidays away from London. Right? Every time I hear about a stabbing in London, I can't sleep until I know exactly where this has happened. Okay, right, my school is located on the city fringe in a very densely populated area where there is high crime because I liaise with the Safe Neighborhood team. We host some of the meetings here. And I am very well aware that Philip Lawrence was a head teacher in London in 1995 who was stabbed to death. As a head teacher, he was stabbed to death. So, I know the risk that's associated, and head teachers up and down the country doing their jobs, as well as other bodies. So, in terms of a short answer, youth centers played a small part. In terms of the broader solution, right, my if you were to look at some of the work that I did back in Oldham from a very young age, we engaged hundreds of young people in various sporting activities, various cultural activities, getting involved, looking forward to day trips with their friends, because families can organize day trips. Right? Some families won't because they can't fit everyone into one car. Right? But they cannot organize a day trip with the children and their friends, which requires a minibus, which requires a coach. That's where the volunteers need to come in. That's where the voluntary sector, again, when I first moved to London in 2002, I managed a football team for 3 years in the London league. But these were adults, and I would have loved to see more of these adults look after the little boys and girls from a very young age and give them a diversionary activity, something that they're interested in, something that they'll train for, something that they'll look forward to. You know, as a small school, we try and get our kids into a range of sports in terms of looking forward to some of the debating competition, some of the work that we do with people from the City of London, Canary Wharf, and so on. What we cannot forget is London is a great city. The UK, yes, we are going to go through some tough time in the next few years, but has fantastic opportunities. And when the people of London, when these young kids open the windows, when they get out of the house, they look left and right, they will see Canary Wharf, they will see the City of London. And it is our job as educators and people living in the communities and parents to inspire these young people to think big, think 10 years further down the road and say, I can have that great life. I can buy my own place. I can drive a nice car and I can get a job in there. And that will provide me all this. But then this is.
Ashid bhai, sorry to interrupt. I want to ask you something. You mentioned obviously mosque, and I think the mosque does play very important role. But my worry is, and I want to get your opinion on this as a head teacher of a school, is that many mosques, we know only a handful of mosques delivers khutbah or lectures in English. And a lot of the mosques it still does on Friday khutbah in Arabic. When I sit there, yes, I respectfully listen, but I haven't got clue what I'm listening to. I am not learning anything from it. And so the young people, when they go there, I see often people in the mosque, they well the khutbah going on, they're too busy on their phone because they're not actually interacting because they don't understand what being said. And does that have some sort of impact?
Right. The people who are involved in the street crimes, right, majority of them are not in the mosque. Okay, so the young people that we need to target, the position of the Friday Khutbah is a different debate because some scholars will argue it should be Arabic only. Others will argue it can be any language. So I don't want to go into that debate. I'm not Islamic scholar, but what is important is when these children.
But we have to understand what's been said.
I understand, Oliur, but what we need to do is when these families pay for the children to go to the mosque between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the evening, between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock on Saturday and Sunday, this is where the important work happens. Because these kids are impressionable, they're young at that time. They're between the ages of 6 and 14 probably. That's where you have to do the work in the English language in terms of not just learning to read the Quran, understanding the Quran, but learning to grow up as a young man and a woman in a civil society, the difference between rights and wrongs, being able to make a living working hard rather than cutting corners. And that's important.
Syeda, can I come to you? Obviously, Farhad Choudhury saying, can you please engage with the Mayor of London office and tell him we need to tackle this? I'm sure Mayor of London is listening. He knows he's got election coming up and he will have to face the voters. So I'm sure he will take this knife crime very seriously. And I think Sadiq Khan does take seriously whether he's done enough or not. People will be judge of that, not this channel or myself or any of my guests. Say that we are end of our show, and I want you to give a message to the young people. Often I describe as young people of today are the leaders of tomorrow.
Future,
Um,
yeah.
and what would you say to those young people who may be watching right now or will be watching repeat tomorrow or day after?
With the young people should hope and have ambition. And there is no harm in having ambitions and big ones too, and big, ideas. And then people should be encouraged. So I won't say our community is failing because we see constant attainment in education, a higher attainment. And we see they're doing really well, coming out with like 10 GCSEs, A double stars. So we have to celebrate that as well. But we are doing well, but there is a minority group which matters a lot because it's serious, because it's knife crime and drug. Now, I've worked in Shuma Clog, Selby Street, and I personally caught few boys, even called the police and handed them over to the police, because I used to face it every day, and I used to work with also the red light area with the prostitution in the night, and so I saw Bengali boys hands-on work, and we did take them off the street and put them in the place where they should really be, either in the mosque, in the rehabilitation center. So what I can say is we should create more role models and be the role model yourself, because that will give you a future, not listening to a crime, somebody who committed a crime, or get persuaded by a friend who's carrying a knife. That's not the future. Future is brighter than that, very bright indeed. So do look after yourself and get mix up with the very inspirational people, and have hope, have a lot of inspiration, and have a lot of ambitions, and and get help from your parents, your schools. When you ask for help, young people, you will get help. If you have to ask for it, and you know how to ask for it. play on the phone every day, all day, many hours. Do look for good stuff. And I'm talking in the very minimal level. You have a phone, take that phone, use that phone to do something good. Don't get carried away with uh, all the bad stuff that coming through your phone or your friends. Thank you so much. And all I can say is keep well and just respect your parents, respect your religion and your culture and other people's culture. And also, you have to learn your culture to respect other people's culture too. So do stay tuned with all that you belong to. Thank you.
Thank you, Syeda. Said, Ashid, by your final comments, please.
Okay, this is drugs and knife crime is a very, very important subject matter for young people, all communities at the moment. Too many people have suffered. I was fortunate enough to meet Baroness Doreen Lawrence back in 2001 when I was speaking at the UN conference in South Africa, right? And the question that I could pose at the time I didn't because I made reference to her son in my speech and she came over to speak to me, and I know what she would do. She would rather give up the word Baroness in front of her name and have a son back every
Mm.
single day. Right? She spent since 1993 campaigning, broke her marriage, broke her family. It did not bring her son back. It gave her a political voice. Right? I would not want to see any other mothers or fathers go through this difficulty and live with losing a young person who has a huge future ahead of them because they didn't take care, take time, or show interest in their children. Now, behavior is learned. Children don't grow up with the idea of I'm going to become a gangster, I'm going to join gangs, I'm going to go into crime. Behavior is learned. There are lots of young, successful people emerging in our communities, and it's really important that we get these young professionals to mentor our teenagers and direct their energies into the right channel.
Thank you so much, Ashid Bhai and Saida, for joining me today and sharing your valuable contribution and knowledge with our viewers. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. And it'll be
Thank
24.
you. Thank you to all our viewers for joining us this evening. Sorry we couldn't read out all the comments. During the debate, we mentioned and discussed about many issues, especially related to drugs and knife crimes. But in the process, we also talked about community leaders. It was not the intention of this channel or my guest or me to attack anybody. And if any had cause, then we do sincerely apologize. However, we must work collectively to tackle drugs and knife crimes. One life lost, that is one life too many. And we cannot afford to see after this pandemic that when the life gets back to normality, the knife crime and drugs is on rise again. And therefore, this channel will take initiative to work with anybody from any background who wants to genuinely prevent knife crimes and drugs taking place within our community. I hope it was useful, and we will continue, and this channel will continue to campaign against knife crimes and drugs. Until next time, do take care, stay safe.